Hey, my name is Julian. Thank you so much for checking out this channel. I'm a native-born Californian in the Sacramento area, Folsom more specifically, and that's where I live now. And in this channel, I plan on talking to folks in California's political system about the issues the state is facing and how we can best solve them. In this first interview, I sat down with candidate for Lieutenant Governor Michael Tubbs. Michael Tubbs was the youngest mayor of a major American city when he was elected mayor of Stockton, California at the age of 26. He was previously a city council member of Stockton before that. In this interview, we talk about issues facing the state, and he gets into his vision for the state and his solutions that he is campaigning on. I'd love if you let me know what you think of the interview down in the comments below. And before you leave the channel, I'd love your support in the form of a subscription and hitting that bell to get notified for new videos. Welcome in, and I hope you stay a while. Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I want to start first with an issue in a lot of Californians' minds, which is homelessness.
Okay.
Over my lifetime, I've seen in our urban areas most definitely, but I would argue across the state, a rise in homelessness, both visible and invisible homelessness. Some estimates have it that we have half of the nation's overnight unhoused homeless population within our state's borders. Tell me about what you think of solutions to this. What would a Tubbs Lieutenant Governor administration look like by way of trying to tackle this issue? And I know that's a big question, it's a big issue, but I'd love to hear.
Well, luckily I served as mayor for 4 years.
That's right.
And city council for 4 years before running, and from 2012 to 2020, we saw homelessness really rise as a top of mind issue for California. And what I learned from my term as mayor is that there's a bunch of reasons and problems connected to homelessness, but we know the core of the issue with homelessness is people not having housing or any sort of shelter. So we have to, A, build more housing, period.
Yeah, that's right.
And B, part of that has to be more increased supply, but we also have to build more affordable housing. I tell people all the time, if you hate homelessness, you love affordable housing. And affordable meaning housing at the price points in which people can afford. We know in California, 35% of people make less than $19 an hour, which means we're going to have a product that is at the level of folks, or even if it's dual income households who are making less than $19, $40 an hour, and build that in addition to luxury condos and all the other stuff that folks want. I think the second thing we have to do, and there's been a lot of conversations about it, is have a actual functional behavioral health system. We know that, and we see it when we go to the store, we see it when we go to the park, that there's fellow citizens, our brothers and sisters, who have either chemical dependency or some sort of mental health issue. But we also know, and research tells us, that no treatment is effective outside. You can't really, you can't help someone get well, you can't help someone get sober, you can't help someone become on the path to being more productive if they're outside, if they're in a tent, if they're not safe. So we have to build more of all types of housing, from transitional housing to emergency shelter to temporary housing to permanent supportive housing to more housing generally, right? And I think that's part what frustrates people, is that's not going to be one thing. It's going to be all the things we have to do. And then number three, we if we care, and that's why I always caveat it, if we care about homelessness, we have to be serious about homelessness prevention. We know that evictions spiral people into homelessness, and it's hard for them to get back on the track to housing security. And we know that the vast majority of people who are evicted in the state are evicted. I think UC Benioff had a study that said, not UC Benioff, UCSF and the Benioff Center for Homelessness had a study that said the average amount of rent owed or for people being evicted was less than $400. I think $381 or something like that. And from some of our work in Stockton was around this idea of a guaranteed income. And if we can't get to scale, we should at least begin to seriously debate the merits of having some sort of income floor for folks that we know that are at risk of being evicted, that are at risk of costing all of us lots of money, because we know evictions are incredibly expensive. And then I think lastly, the non-sexy part is we have to have a way to track it and hold all of us accountable. We know it's a city issue, it's a county issue, it's a state issue. And we know that the voters have been generous in giving lots of money to the problem. So I think there has to be fidelity to tracking how those dollars are spent. I think there has to be mechanisms so folks understand what's happening. And I think we have to have sort of an all hands on deck moment where we treat it like the crisis it is, because there's nothing enlightened, there's nothing liberal, there's nothing blue, there's nothing good about being a state where gardeners, firefighters, nannies, teachers, everyone can't afford to be here. There's nothing enlightening about a state where the generation before us were able to buy a home and build wealth, but none of their kids can. Like there's something inverted and backwards there. And the thing is, Trump didn't do that.
No.
MAGA didn't do that.
Not at all.
That's us. So we have to own that and rectify it.
We do. You said a lot of things there that I'd love to follow up on. One of which is Prop 1, which Governor Newsom supported and passed, is meant to address, I think, some of this behavioral health and mental health side of the issue that you identified. I would think that, and certainly I hope that the next governor and lieutenant governor are going to be very careful and provide a lot of oversight with where the money is going. I don't know if you heard about this audit that the legislature did about homelessness spending in the state, $24 billion, and the result was basically, well, we don't know what's working and what doesn't work, but we're still going to spend the money. So I think there's definitely room there for you when you're in power to take the opportunity Californians have given the next generation of leaders like you and make the most of it.
No, absolutely, and I think that's unacceptable, right?
It is.
And I think that's part of the reason
It's embarrassing.
And I think that's part of the reason why I'm running, is that I see very clearly that the antidote to MAGA isn't slogans, isn't wearing black shirts on Black History Month and rainbow shirts during Pride, but it's actually delivering.
Yes.
And we can't see the language of accountability to the other side. Like the most enlightened thing you can do is to make sure that government works, because the people at the middle and the bottom who need government to work the most, right? So this idea that, when I was mayor of Stockton, we had just come out of bankruptcy. Yeah. So I'm very, very, very careful with public expenditure. So the fact that $24 billion to address a problem, and we can't clearly articulate how that money went and what's worked and what didn't, because let me backtrack. I don't think the public expects perfection. I don't think the public expects 100%
we may disagree on that,
get it right. I don't think they expect perfection. I think they expect us to know what's working, what isn't. Like, I don't think they expect the first pitch. Homelessness is it's an adaptive issue. There's not we're gonna have to trial and ever iterate, but at the very least, I think the public expects us to say this is where we got it wrong and this is how we're rectifying it. Right? And the fact that we can't even tell what's working, what's not, is a serious problem, and it's actually unacceptable.
I think taking ownership is one of the first things we teach our kids. It's something that we like to pride ourselves on in society and encourage, and I think that's what we should all aspire for our leaders to accomplish, and hope that they do, and I think that's a great spirit.
Just be accountable.
I agree. Let me ask you this. California is not an affordable place to live, which is what we just talked about earlier. Part of that is taxes. We got the highest state income tax in the country. I won't name my buddy, but I have a buddy who chose to live in Nevada on the state line specifically to dodge the California income tax.
Oh, come back.
I've been telling him the same thing, but it's hard to argue with the $25K discount he gets from living in Nevada. Now that said, look, I'm a California boy. I would never leave our state. I'll pay the premium, the sunshine tax, whatever you want to call it. But I wonder from your perspective, what is your view on, are the taxes just right for our state? Do we need to increase the taxes for certain people? Do we need to lower them for some? Do we need to lower it across the board? What does the tax policy world of Lieutenant Governor Tubbs look like?
Yeah, no, I think, marrying to our first question, as someone who since becoming mayor has had to pay more in taxes, I think people understand the need to provide a baseline level of services to everyone. People understand the need for schools and firefighters and police support, et cetera. But I think what frustrates people is not seeing the return on that investment. And like you mentioned, the $24 billion, not being able to articulate it. So I think any conversation with taxes has to start with, can we clearly illustrate to folks where their money is going and why? So I don't think we need to increase taxes for sure. But I also think our current budget issues illustrate that we're not in a position where we can necessarily significantly reduce taxes, but I think there's ways we can look at some of the regulatory environment that aren't taxes but still cost folks money, and figure out sort of how do we make it easier to start a business? How do you make it easier to navigate process? How do you make permitting easier? How do we reduce maybe not taxes but fees that we don't need? So I would start there, and then my hope over the next 16 years would be creating such an environment where prosperity is widely shared, that then we're able to have a conversation about reducing taxes because more people have more to give, right? I think part of the reason why our tax environment is the way it is that our whole system is built on sort of those in the tech ecosystem and those doing well paying the lion's shares of taxes, and because there's so many people who are still contributing but may not have the money to contribute in the same way. And I think if we lift the bottom, then there's less pressure on the top and more people can pay.
Yeah.
And then I also think with emerging technologies like AI, et cetera, there has to be a conversation about value capture and how do we create some sort of, we're not a sovereignty, but like a sovereign wealth fund quasi model for California, given the amount of innovation stuff that happens here, or a data dividend, or like, we have to do something with the value that's going to be created and captured so that we're able to make sure everyone gets a piece of it. So I would definitely come strong in favor of that. But in terms of raising taxes, it's like, where are we at? There's only so much more we can go. And I think we need people who pay taxes to stay in California to pay taxes. So I don't, and we're also competing with other states. So I think that the first thing we have to do is make sure we're good stewards of the taxes we're paying now. And eventually, I would love to get to a point where we could have a real conversation about like how do we reduce the tax rate, because I think more people in people's pockets is good for everyone, and kind of again counters this narrative that California is a place that's just taking your money to this abyss of government and no one knows what's happening. Where it's like, no, California is a place where you can make money, where you can build wealth, where you can leave something for your children, and then you're happy to be part of the process of making sure the next generation is able to have some too.
Some people have focused on the fact, and I see this debate raging on the national level about how people leave California, how we might have a net deficit, call it, of people leaving the state for other states. Now, I'll say personally, this doesn't reflect our wonderful candidates' views, that listen, we're crowded here. People want to take off and go elsewhere. I ain't crying about it. We got crowded parking lots. Our urban areas are overflowing. We got a housing shortage. Like, if y'all want to go somewhere else, I Godspeed, God bless. I appreciate you, and I love you as a fellow American. I wonder if you find this problematic. Do you think it's a bad thing inherently that people are leaving the state? Give me your thoughts.
I mean, I think immigration, migration, et cetera, are things that happen in communities. I think what concerns me about California, though, is who's leaving, because oftentimes it's focused on the very wealthy who say they're leaving, et cetera. But the data says the vast majority of people who are leaving are working class, middle class, poor folks who are going to Nevada, who are going to Texas, who are going to Georgia, because it's more affordable, because they can afford housing, because they can afford and I think for a state that espouses being a place of opportunity, that's a problem. And that's also one of the reasons why I decided to run for lieutenant governor, is to really have a conversation about, given how great California is, given all the amenities, all the benefits, it shouldn't just be a place for rich people. That doesn't strike me as incredibly enlightened, or particularly as someone who grew up poor, right? Like, and particularly as someone who understands the value of having a wide range of experiences and skill sets. Like and part of the issue we're seeing being from Stockton, where we had the highest rate of super commuters in the country, people who are commuting 4 hours for work. And these folks were driving 4 or 5 hours in San Francisco, sometimes to work in tech, sometimes to work in healthcare, but oftentimes to be janitors, to be waiters, to be all these other jobs that have dignity, but to make $25 versus $19. And so I do think that people will continue to leave California and will be robbed of the ingenuity, the brilliance, the entrepreneurial spirit, the vibrancy, the culture that folks bring, if we don't find a way to make it affordable to be here, which looks at reducing the regulatory overhead, which looks like making it possible for people to build housing. And then once the housing is built, make sure people can afford it. And if we don't solve those issues, people will keep leaving, and then California will look radically different in 10 years. So no, I think it's a big problem.
All right, what do you do on your day off? You're 1 day off a week, I would imagine.
I got 3 kids, so there's no day off. Play dates.
Your hour off per week. What does that look like for you?
I've been doing like a little boxing class, getting campaign shape, scroll on Instagram. Read.
Same.
I'm pretty bored. I'm like really actually a pretty boring person. Or I hang out with my friends. If I can hang out with
That's
my friends,
not that
that's
boring.
fine.
You got a variety of interests there. Boxing is good.
I mean, it's not an interest. I just started, but that's what I do for my little.
You watch basketball?
Yeah.
Okay, so I can only imagine because you're a Stockton guy, and the closest team to you is the Sacramento Kings.
When I was mayor, I brought the Stockton Kings to Stockton.
Right on.
That's my claim to fame.
Very cool. Is that the
G League team?
The G League.
It's the only thing.
Let's go.
But it's the only thing my little brother, of all the things I did in Stockton, that's the only thing he called me and said, good job. He's not even a sports fan. He was like, yo.
That's the most meaningful thing you did.
Seriously, he was like, yo, I could get a jersey that says Stockton on it? I was like, yeah.
So then you're literally a Kings fan.
Yeah.
But let's take it to the NBA.
Okay.
I better hear that you're a Sacramento Kings
Absolutely,
fan.
like the beam. But actually,
Light the beam.
I'm also ranked statewide, so I love the Warriors. I love
All
the
right,
Lakers.
you got to pick one. Who are you picking?
Kings.
Let's go. That's
I pick
my
Kings.
boy. That's my boy. All right. Kendrick or Drake? There's really
Kendrick,
only
yeah.
one. Okay,
Which
I
is-
didn't even finish the question.
No, but I would say, as a caveat, I was Drake's probably top 2% of Drake fans.
I feel that.
I think
I feel
if
that.
you go through my Instagram, a lot of them are Drake lyrics. If you look at my speeches when I was mayor, a lot of them were Drake lyrics. My vows when I was married had Drake lyrics. So it wasn't an easy decision to come to. But I think, much like politics, culture shifts. And I think, I love, but no, Good Kid, Mad City is probably my favorite album.
The best.
Of the last decade. Mm-hmm. Even though Kendrick wasn't my favorite. Like J. Cole was number 1. Drake number 2, Kendrick 3. But the last year, Kendrick has like just really bodied him. And
yes.
I mean, Kendrick won. I live in LA now, so it's like. And but I agree with Kendrick when he said I like Drake with the melodies. So Drake with the melodies, still top tier.
Yeah, Kendrick with the rap.
Yeah, Kendrick
with the
like
melodies.
Kendrick like it's just what like and then my youngest son, when he's crying, if I put on anything from GNX, he gets quiet, particularly turning music off, Squabble Up, or Peekaboo. He's 15 months, he goes, he loves it. He loves it. So, Kendrick for sure.
That just tells you that there's something in the music.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, this is
Speaks for
this is
itself.
spiritual at this point.
Michael, thank you.
All right, thank you, brother.
Thank you.